I didn't want to correct the 88, but I'm not that old. That would have put 10 years on me. I'd be 77 years old. It's a pleasure to be back here. I spent many wonderful years with the company and have a lot of great memories, and I get a wonderful check every month. So think about retirement for whoever you work for. 3M is absolutely the best. And you're working and selling the products of the best company that I know of. People that know football, that have watched football over the years, probably think I look familiar. And everywhere I go in the country, people see me and they say, "Hi, how are you? Nice to see you." And if my wife's with me, she said, "Who is that?" And I say, "I don't know." They recognize my face from television. I'm a familiar old face for 23 years on TV. They think they know me. They met me at a company meeting or they met me at a convention. The last thing they think about is football. But it's kind of a good feeling inside. It's kind of a minor celebrity role. You know, I was in O'Hare Field during my last season in the league, in the washroom, minding my own business like I always do, washing my hands when I noticed someone looking at me in the mirror. He looked from side to side. He finally realized who I was. He tapped me on the shoulder. I looked up. He went. I nodded. He patted me on the back, and I walked out. That's the kind of recognition we get. Very minor. People think that I'm an expert, of course, on football. 45 years of officiating. I'm not an expert on football. I'm an expert on officiating football. I'm an expert on risk-taking. I'm an expert on leadership. I'm an expert on finding out how good you can be at what you do. How good are you at what you do in your personal life, in your business life? How do you find out how good you really are? You take those risks in life. You take those chances in business and in personal life that show you every once in a while how good you really are. Officiating is a microcosm of the real business world. It's the same as your 60 or 70-hour week that you put in on the job. It's just compressed into 3.5 hours on a Sunday. Risky stuff? When you make a mistake on a pro football field, it's seen all over the world in a matter of seconds. When you make a mistake in the field, you can probably correct it. Or you can make a phone call and find out what the answer is. We can't do that. Risky stuff. Now, I live in Chicago. And when you live in a city with a pro football team, the #1 rule is you don't work for that team. Now, you might say, well, if he's a Chicagoan, he must be a Chicago Bear fan. The people would think that he was biased. That's not the reason we don't work in the city that we live in. The reason is that people in Chicago know who I am. They know where I live. The league doesn't want my house blown up because of an offside call. So I never worked a Chicago Bear game for 11 years in the league. But in 1986, a phone call came early November. We're going to give you a Bear game. It's the only one you'll probably ever have. We're having a problem scheduling. It's late in the season. It'll be a nothing game. Green Bay's only won 2 ball games all year. The Bears are a shoo-in for the division. It's going to be terrific. You'll have your crew out to your house for dinner. It'll be something really wonderful. And I was excited. I told my wife, my crew had never been to my home. I mean, she made a wonderful dinner. Everybody came. It was terrific. We strolled around Soldier Field on this gloomy late November day. A lot of old friends saw me. Jerry, nice to see you. I was so excited. The big thing was I was going to be home for dinner. No plane ride home, no coming in at 11 or 12 o'clock at night. I was going to be home at 5 o'clock. It started a typical Green Bay Bear game. We had a couple of big fouls early. Then we settled the game down and everything was going well. 3 minutes left in the second quarter. Jim McMahon, their great quarterback, took the snap, dropped back to throw, looked around, quick pass up the middle, intercepted. Green Bay going the other way. Simple. Now my job as the referee was to watch the quarterback. Now, I don't watch the flight of the pass once it leaves his hand. I'm right with him to make sure no one hurts him. Now, his head was down. I could tell from the moan of the crowd we had an interception. And he was very dejected. He was slowly inching himself toward the sideline when I noticed the Green Bay man running toward him. and the play was over for at least 20 seconds. I was about to run downfield to get the play set up, going the other way. Something said, "Don't go, stay." I backed up a couple of steps. This big number 94 from Green Bay ran over. A full 30 seconds after the play had ended, grabbed McMahon, picked him up, turned him upside down, stuffed him head first into the ground. McMahon landed on his head and his shoulder. My flag hit the ground before McMahon did. I looked at him, the crowd hushed. Thought, my God, he's killed him. I've been waiting 11 years to work a local home game in Chicago. This guy's just been murdered on the field. I'm going to be blamed for his death. Charles Martin was the perpetrator. Martin pushed off of the prone body of McMahon, got up on his feet. Jim Covert, the Bears All-Pro left tackle, who had seen this, the only one on the field that actually saw this act, came running from 20 yards away. He hit Martin with the latest hit ever recorded on a pro football field. I went for my penalty flag instinctively. It was already down. The next thing you throw is your hat. I had a brand new hat for this game. $12.95. It was a lousy, muddy day. I said, the heck with this. This hat is not going into the mud. If I offset this penalty, we'll probably be killed out here on the field. So I did nothing. Ben Montgomery, my line judge, threw his flag in. It was a late hit. 2 flags on the ground. Mike Ditka, in his prime, reserved, mild-mannered, stepped off the sideline. "Markbreit," he said, "I see 2 flags down. What does that mean?" I said, "Offset, coach." He said, "Offset? You mean there won't be a penalty? My man may be dead." I said, "Coach, you know the rule. A penalty on both sides is an offset." He said, "I'm going to give you the Ditka rule. You offset that penalty." He said, "You won't get home for dinner tonight." By this time, Martin is up on his feet now. This guy's 6'5", 325 pounds. I'm not standing in a hole up here. I'm 5'9". I walked over. I grabbed him by the arm as hard as I could. I said, "Fella, you're out of the game. Let's go." Now, we're not supposed to grab players out there. When you grab them, they usually turn and punch you and claim they thought you were someone from the other team. But I couldn't leave this thing. This thing was ready to explode. As I grabbed his arm, he pulled away from me vehemently. He said, "I'm not going anywhere with you." I said, "If you don't come with me right now, I'm going to let the Bears kill you." He looked, he said, "Okay, let's go." I took him to the sideline. Forrest Gregg, his coach. I said, "Coach, this man is ejected from the game. Get him out of here." Gregg looked at me in dismay. He said, "What did he do?" I left to the middle of the field. Ditka now out on the field, trying to administer to McMahon, who is still out. Ditka walked over to me. He said, "Jerry," he said, "apologies for trying to threaten you from the sideline." He said, "We're going to do everything we can to get you safely out of here after the game, whether you offset that penalty or not." Well, I talked Ben into picking his flag up. We didn't have an offset. I didn't have the right to do that, but I thought for safety's sake and for the life of the officials that I wouldn't have an offset that day. I kicked Charles Martin out of the ball game, which was the first time an ejection had occurred in a pro football game for something other than a fight. Now, I didn't know whether I had the right to do those or not. I took a chance that day. I took a big risk. I made 2 decisions that I really couldn't back up with anything but common sense. I got my 2nd Super Bowl that year based on that decision, those decisions. The league backed me. I was right. I made the right decisions. Had I run downfield 10 seconds earlier, I would have missed this whole thing. I might have destroyed my career. But I took a chance. It was the biggest day of my officiating life in all 45 years. It was a nothing game that meant nothing in the standings on a kind of a nothing day late in November that turned out to be the biggest day of my professional life in officiating. How often do you go out on a normal day, a regular day, making your calls and your presentations? Do you treat it like it's the biggest day of your life? Do you put everything you have into it? Or do you just go out and kind of nonchalantly go through the work? because you never know when something really big's going to happen. And if you're ready and you make the right decisions, you're going to find out how good you are at what you do.